Maria was a simple woman who lived in a quiet little town surrounded by green fields and dusty roads. Her house was small but neat, with a little garden full of bright flowers that she took care of every morning before work. Life was not easy for her, but she had learned to smile through every struggle. She didn't have much money, fancy clothes, or modern luxuries, but she had something far more valuable: strong hands, a sharp mind, and a heart full of determination. Her father had been a mechanic all his life. When Maria was a little girl, she used to watch him fix engines with curiosity sparkling in her eyes. While other children played outside, Maria sat near the workbench handing her father tools and learning how every part of a machine worked. Her father often told her, "Engines are like people, Maria. They only need care, patience, and the right touch." Those words stayed with her forever. When her father passed away, the small workshop he built with his own hands became hers. It wasn't big or fancy, just a rusty shed with a few tools, an old fan, and the smell of oil and metal everywhere. But to Maria, it was a sacred place. Every morning she opened the workshop doors with pride, ready to face whatever challenges came her way. Most of her customers were farmers, drivers, or townsfolk with old motorbikes and tractors that often broke down. She charged very little because she knew people couldn't afford much, and she never wanted anyone to walk away helpless. Sometimes she fixed things for free, especially for the elderly or those who had no money. "A kind heart is worth more than a full pocket," she always said. Despite her kindness, life wasn't easy. The workshop barely earned enough to cover her expenses. The roof leaked when it rained, and her hands were always covered in grease. Many people underestimated her just because she was a woman working in a man's job. Some even laughed, saying, "What does a woman know about engines?" But Maria never let their words break her spirit. Instead, she worked harder, proving her worth one repair at a time. Every evening, when the sun set behind the hills, Maria would sit outside her workshop, wiping sweat from her forehead, feeling both tired and proud. The sound of engines she fixed still echoed in her ears, each one a small victory. Children in the neighborhood liked to stop by, watching her work with wide eyes. Maria always smiled at them and sometimes showed them how the machines worked, hoping to inspire them the way her father once inspired her. Her life followed a simple rhythm: fix engines, help people, and stay grateful. But deep inside, she dreamed of something more. She wanted to make her father proud. She wanted her little workshop to grow into something bigger, a place where anyone, especially women, could learn to work with machines without fear or judgment. Even though she didn't know how or when that dream would come true, she never stopped believing that life had something special waiting for her. Maria was not the kind of woman who complained about her hardships. Instead, she believed that every challenge was a test of patience. When business was slow, she used the time to clean her tools, study repair manuals, or improve her skills. Some evenings, when the sky turned orange and the air grew quiet, she would look up and whisper to her father, "I'm still trying, Papa. I'm not giving up." Those words gave her strength to keep going. People in the town respected her even if they didn't always understand her. They knew that if their tractor stopped working or their motorbike refused to start, Maria was the only one who could bring it back to life. They called her the woman with magic hands. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Her life seemed ordinary from the outside, the same workshop, the same customers, the same routine. But Maria never realized that her life was about to change forever. Sometimes destiny hides behind the simplest days, waiting for the right moment to surprise us. And for Maria, that moment was coming soon. She had no idea that one random afternoon, a stranger with a broken car would drive into her life and change it completely. But for now, she was just Maria, a simple woman with a kind heart, living an honest life, working with grease-stained hands and dreams brighter than gold. Every night, she fell asleep tired but peaceful, knowing that she had done her best. She didn't have riches, but she had respect. She didn't have luxury, but she had purpose. And in her quiet little corner of the world, that was enough. She never imagined that one act of kindness and skill would soon bring a luxury helicopter to her doorstep and turn her small-town life into an incredible story that people would talk about for years to come. But that was tomorrow. For today, Maria was just a humble woman repairing engines, guided by her father's memory, unaware that her destiny was already preparing a grand surprise. The sun was hiding behind dark clouds that afternoon. The wind blew hard, carrying the smell of rain and dust through the narrow streets of the little town. Maria had just finished fixing a tractor when she heard the first rumble of thunder. She wiped her hands with an old cloth and looked at the gray sky. "Looks like a storm's coming," she whispered to herself. She was about to close her workshop early when she heard a strange sound, the loud coughing of a car engine struggling to start. Moments later, a shiny black luxury car rolled to a stop right in front of her small workshop. It looked completely out of place in that quiet, dusty street. The car's paint gleamed even under the dark clouds, and its silver logo shone like a mirror. Maria blinked in surprise. People in her town mostly drove old vehicles, tractors, bikes, or small pickup trucks. She had never seen a car so beautiful and expensive up close. The engine made one last wheeze and died completely. The driver stepped out, frowning deeply. He was wearing an expensive suit that didn't belong anywhere near oil or dirt. He looked like someone who owned skyscrapers, not someone who'd ever walk into a small-town repair shop. "Excuse me," he said in a hurried tone. "Do you know anyone who can fix this? I'm late for a very important meeting." Maria smiled politely. "You're standing in a workshop, sir. I can take a look at it." The man raised an eyebrow. "You?" he asked, sounding doubtful. "Are you sure? This is a complicated machine, not a tractor." Maria didn't take offense. She had heard that tone before. The tone of people who didn't believe a woman could fix an engine. "I know," she replied calmly, walking toward the car. "But machines speak the same language no matter how expensive they are." He hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "Fine, just be careful. This car cost more than this whole street, probably." Maria laughed softly. "Then let's hope I don't make it worse." She opened the hood and peered inside. The smell of burnt oil filled the air. The problem was clear: a damaged belt and an overheated valve. It was tricky, but not impossible. Rain began to fall and thunder echoed overhead. Maria didn't care. She pulled her toolkit closer and started working, her hands moving quickly and confidently, just like her father's once did. The man, whose name was Mr. Anderson, watched her silently. He couldn't believe his eyes. The woman in front of him worked with such focus, her fingers steady, her eyes sharp. Grease stained her hands, but there was a quiet grace in everything she did. He had met engineers in big cities who took hours to do what she seemed to understand in minutes. As the rain grew heavier, Maria's clothes became damp, but she didn't stop. Her hair stuck to her face, but she kept going. After nearly an hour, she turned the key and smiled as the engine came back to life, smooth and powerful. The car purred like a satisfied cat. Mr. Anderson's mouth fell open. "It's running perfectly," he exclaimed, walking closer. "How did you—" No one in the city could find the issue. Maria wiped her hands again and said simply, "Machines just need patience and attention. That's all." He reached for his wallet, pulling out several crisp notes. "Take this," he said. "You've saved me. I don't have time to waste." Maria shook her head gently. "Just pay for the parts I replaced." "Nothing more." He stared at her in disbelief. "You could have charged me 10 times that." "I would have paid without question." She smiled kindly. "Maybe, but honesty doesn't have a price. I fix engines, not people's pockets." For a moment, Mr. Anderson said nothing. The rain slowed, and a golden ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, shining on Maria's small workshop. Something about her words hit him deep inside, a kind of sincerity he hadn't seen in years. He had met hundreds of people who only cared about money, yet here stood a woman who cared only about doing what was right. He nodded slowly. "Thank you, Maria," he said softly, reading her name from the wooden sign above her door. "You've given me more than you think." Maria didn't understand what he meant. She just smiled and said, "Drive safe, sir. The road ahead is still slippery." He got into the car, still looking thoughtful. As he drove away, Maria waved goodbye, not knowing that she had just changed her own future. When the sound of the engine faded into the distance, Maria closed her workshop and stood by the door watching the rain. Her heart felt oddly warm. She had helped a stranger, nothing new for her. Yet something about this meeting felt different. She didn't know who he really was, but his eyes had carried a strange sadness, like someone used to having everything but missing something important. Maria shrugged the thought away and went back inside to tidy up. She had no idea that the man she'd just helped was a millionaire, and that he wasn't done with her yet. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the sound of rain on her roof, she replayed the day in her mind. She thought about the shiny car, the fancy man, and the way he looked at her when the engine started again. She smiled to herself. Just another job well done, she whispered before falling asleep. But somewhere high above the clouds, fate was already writing her next chapter, one that would arrive the very next morning, not on 4 wheels, but with the roar of helicopter blades echoing through the sky. The next morning arrived calm and bright, with soft sunlight spilling through the cracks of Maria's workshop window. Birds chirped outside as she swept the floor, humming a quiet tune to herself. The smell of engine oil and metal filled the air, a scent that had become part of her life. She felt peaceful. The storm was gone and everything seemed back to normal. She had almost forgotten about the fancy car and the serious man from the day before. To her it was just another repair, another stranger passing through. But somewhere in the city, that very stranger hadn't stopped thinking about her. Maria poured herself a cup of tea, sat on a wooden stool, and began cleaning her tools. Each wrench and spanner had its place. Her hands moved with care and respect, the way an artist handles a paintbrush. For Maria, machines weren't just metal and wires. They were living puzzles that tested her patience and rewarded her honesty. She smiled when she remembered how surprised the man had looked when his car came back to life. His face had changed completely, from frustration to shock, then to quiet admiration. He probably reached his meeting, she thought with a small laugh. I hope the car didn't break again. Just then, the sound of footsteps outside made her look up. It was old Mr. Patel, her neighbor, holding a broken water pump. Maria, Betty, can you look at this again? It's making strange noises, he said, his wrinkled face kind and worried. Of course, Uncle, she replied cheerfully. Leave it here. I'll fix it by evening. As she worked on the pump, her mind wandered. Strange how people trust me so much, she thought. Even the rich man did in his own way. She smiled faintly, wiping sweat from her forehead. Far away, in a tall glass office overlooking the city skyline, Mr. Anderson sat at his desk staring out of the window. He was surrounded by wealth, polished floors, leather chairs, and assistants running around with files. But none of it felt satisfying that morning. He kept remembering that woman from the dusty town, her steady hands, her calm voice, and her refusal to take extra money. He had met many people who claimed to be experts, yet they often cheated or bragged. But this woman, Maria, had something different. She was skilled, yes, but more than that, she was pure-hearted. There was no greed, no pride, and only honesty. And that honesty had struck a chord deep inside him. Sir, his assistant asked, are you ready for the meeting? Mr. Anderson looked up slowly. Cancel it, he said. I have something more important to do. Back in the small town, Maria finished repairing the pump and handed it back to Mr. Patel, who thanked her with a smile. The day passed peacefully. Children ran past her workshop laughing, and the smell of food from nearby houses filled the air. Everything felt normal, until the sound came. A loud, heavy sound unlike anything the town had ever heard before. The ground seemed to tremble slightly. People stepped out of their houses, shielding their eyes from the wind. Then from the sky, a luxury helicopter appeared, shining in the afternoon sun. Its blades roared like thunder, blowing dust and leaves everywhere. Maria froze, blinking in disbelief. The helicopter hovered for a few seconds before landing right near her workshop. The whole neighborhood gathered around, whispering in shock. Who could it be? Someone asked. Maybe a government official? Another guessed. Maria stood still, her heart racing. Her apron flapped in the wind, her hair dancing wildly. She had never seen a helicopter this close before. The door opened slowly, and out stepped a man in a black suit, tall, confident, and smiling. It was Mr. Anderson. For a moment, Maria couldn't move. Her eyes widened. You again? She asked, half shocked, half amused. He laughed softly. Yes, me again. I hope I didn't scare you with the helicopter. Scare me? She said, still trying to process what was happening. You nearly blew my workshop away. The crowd chuckled, but Mr. Anderson's eyes were warm. I came to see you, Maria, he said sincerely. I couldn't stop thinking about you after yesterday. Maria frowned slightly. Why, I just fixed your car, sir. He nodded. Yes, but you fixed more than that. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Honesty, humility, and passion for one's work. You didn't ask for extra money, even when you could have. That means something. Maria didn't know what to say. Compliments always made her shy. "I only did my job," she said quietly. Mr. Anderson smiled. "That's exactly why I'm here." He stepped closer, the sound of the helicopter blades fading. "Maria, I own one of the largest automobile companies in the country. We design engines, vehicles, and advanced machines. But lately I've been looking for someone who truly understands machines, not just in theory, but with heart. Yesterday I found that person." Maria blinked, unsure if she heard him right. "Me?" she whispered. "Yes, you," he said with certainty. "I want to offer you a chance to work with my engineers, to lead a small team, learn new things, and show the world what you can do. I'll provide everything you need, training, equipment, and support. I believe in your talent," the entire crowd gasped. Maria's hands trembled slightly. She looked down at her grease-stained fingers, then back at him. "But sir, I'm just a small-town mechanic. I didn't even finish school properly." Mr. Anderson smiled kindly. "You have something schools can't teach. Real knowledge, patience, and integrity. That's worth more than any degree." Tears welled in Maria's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," he said gently. Maria took a deep breath, looked around at her small workshop, the crowd, and the open sky, and then smiled. "All right, sir. I'll say yes." Mr. Anderson extended his hand, and as Maria shook it, the town erupted in applause. The helicopter stood tall behind them, shining like a symbol of her new beginning. At that moment, Maria didn't just fix an engine, she had unknowingly fixed her own destiny. That night, Maria couldn't sleep. The sound of the helicopter's blades still echoed in her ears. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mr. Anderson's kind but serious face and heard his voice asking her to join his company. It felt like a dream, one of those dreams that were too bright to be real. She lay in her small bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. "Why me?" she whispered to herself. "There are so many smart people in the world. Why would a man like him choose someone like me, a woman from a small town with old tools and grease on her hands?" Outside, the night was quiet. The moonlight slipped through her window and landed on her workbench, the same place where she had spent years fixing engines, struggling to keep her father's dream alive. Her eyes softened. "Papa," she murmured, "you always said every engine has a purpose. Maybe I have one too." Far away in his city mansion surrounded by glass and lights, Mr. Anderson sat in his study, unable to rest either. A file lay open on his desk, but he wasn't reading it. Instead, he was lost in thought, replaying the moment he met Maria. He remembered how she stood in the rain, sleeves rolled up, her face calm and confident as she repaired his car. There was something rare in her, not just skill, but honesty. She didn't chase money, fame, or attention. She simply wanted to do what was right. And that, he realized, was exactly what the world needed more of. He leaned back in his chair, whispering to himself, "People like her are why hope still exists." The next morning, Maria woke up early. She looked around her small house, the cracked walls, the old calendar, the tiny stove, everything she had lived with for years. It all looked the same, but something inside her had changed. She felt nervous, but also excited. As she stepped outside, she found the whole neighborhood waiting for her. Word had spread quickly. Children waved, women smiled, and even old men who rarely left their porches had come to see her off. "We're proud of you, Maria," someone shouted, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll make our town proud." A few hours later, she stood at the edge of a wide-open field where the helicopter had landed the day before. Mr. Anderson was waiting, dressed simply this time with a warm smile. "Good morning, Maria," he said. "Ready to begin a new journey?" She nodded shyly. "I think so, but I'm scared too," he smiled gently. "Fear is natural. It only means you're about to do something brave." As the helicopter lifted off the ground, Maria watched her town grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared beneath the clouds. She pressed her hand against the window, whispering a silent goodbye. The city that awaited her was unlike anything she had ever seen. Tall buildings touching the sky, bright lights everywhere, cars speeding by like silverfish in a river of glass. She had never imagined herself in such a place. Her heart pounded with awe and uncertainty. When they reached the headquarters of Anderson Motors, Maria could barely breathe. The building was enormous, its glass walls reflecting the sunlight like a mirror. Inside, everything looked new and polished. Engineers in crisp uniforms walked around with tablets and blueprints. Machines hummed softly in the background. "This," Mr. Anderson said proudly, "is where ideas become reality." Maria looked around, overwhelmed. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He smiled. "And now it's your new workplace." Her eyes widened. "Mine?" "Yes, you'll start here, learning, experimenting, leading. I want you to work with our team, share your knowledge, and help us see things differently. Sometimes big companies forget the beauty of simplicity. You, Maria, remind us of that." As the days turned into weeks, Maria adapted slowly but surely. The engineers were amazed by her practical knowledge. While they talked in technical terms, she solved problems with her hands and instincts. When a machine malfunctioned, she didn't rush to check the manual. She listened to the sound, felt the vibrations, and understood what it needed. Soon, even the most experienced technicians began asking for her advice. "Maria, how did you know the valve was jammed?" One of them asked once. She smiled and replied, "Engines talk, you just have to listen." Her humble nature, kindness, and quiet confidence won everyone's hearts. Mr. Anderson often watched her from his office window, smiling proudly. She wasn't just fixing engines anymore. She was fixing people's belief in honesty, patience, and hard work. One evening, as the sun set behind the city skyline, Mr. Anderson invited her to his office. "Maria," he said, "do you know why I came back to see you that day?" She shook her head. "No, sir. I still wonder." He looked out the window, his tone thoughtful. "I've built a business worth millions. I've met hundreds of people, but very few with integrity. When you refused my money and said you only did what was right, it reminded me of something my father used to say. A person who works with honesty is richer than a king. That day, you didn't just repair my car. Maria, you repaired my faith in goodness." Maria was silent, her eyes glistening. She smiled softly and said, "Maybe we both fixed something that day, sir." Mr. Anderson laughed gently. "Yes, maybe we did." As she left his office that night, Maria paused for a moment in the hallway, looking at her reflection in the glass door. The woman staring back at her was still the same, simple, humble, with oil stains on her sleeves, but her eyes now carried something new: purpose, pride, and the quiet glow of destiny. She whispered to herself, "Papa was right. Engines aren't the only things that can come back to life. People can too." Weeks turned into months, and Maria's life transformed completely. What once began in a small, dusty workshop had now become a journey of discovery, courage, and purpose. Every morning she arrived at the company early, wearing her simple clothes, carrying her same old toolkit that had once belonged to her father. She refused to replace it, even though Mr. Anderson had offered her new tools many times. "These remind me where I started," she always said with a smile. Her days were busy but fulfilling. The big machines no longer scared her. She treated them like old friends, understanding their rhythm and nature. Engineers half her age admired her focus, and many came to her for advice. She had become known throughout the company as the woman who listens to engines, but Maria never let praise change her. Every evening she returned to her small apartment, cooked a simple meal, and wrote in a small notebook her father had given her long ago. On its first page, faded by time, were his words, "Never forget the sound of honesty. It's louder than any machine." One morning, while she was testing a new engine design, Mr. Anderson entered the lab quietly. He watched her for a few minutes before saying, "Maria, you're not just repairing machines. You're shaping a new way of thinking. You make this place feel alive again." She smiled. "Thank you, sir. I just do what I love." Mr. Anderson nodded. "That's exactly what makes you special." Then he handed her a folder. Inside was a blueprint titled Project Aurora, Women in Engineering Initiative. Maria looked up curiously. "I want to start a new project," he explained. "You'll lead it. The goal is to train women from small towns, just like you, to become skilled engineers. You'll teach them what you know." Maria froze. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the file. "Me? But sir, I've never led anything before." He smiled warmly. "You've already led by example, Maria. The rest will follow." That night, as she sat by her window overlooking the city lights, she thought about her town, the dusty roads, the sound of children playing, the smell of rain on the tin roof. She imagined young girls like she once was, curious, brave, and waiting for a chance. Tears filled her eyes. Maybe this is my purpose, she whispered. Weeks later, the program began. Maria returned to her hometown, not in a car, but in the same luxury helicopter that had once surprised her. The sound of its blades echoed once again over the small houses and narrow lanes. The townspeople rushed outside just like before, shielding their faces from the wind. Children pointed to the sky, shouting, "It's her! Maria Didi is back!" The helicopter landed softly near her old workshop, and Maria stepped out wearing her company uniform, her old toolkit still hanging by her side. Her eyes sparkled with both pride and humility. Mr. Patel, her kind neighbor, was the first to greet her. "Maria Betty," he said emotionally, "we saw your picture in the newspaper. You're famous now." Maria laughed gently. "No, uncle, not famous. Just lucky to be able to do what I love." The mayor of the town came forward and shook her hand. "You've made us proud. You showed the world that greatness can come from the smallest places." But Maria's focus wasn't on fame. It was on the young girls standing at the edge of the crowd, watching her with shining eyes. She smiled at them and said, "I came here to open something special, a small training center right here in our town, a place where you can all learn how to build, repair, and dream big." The crowd erupted in cheers. Some cried. For the first time, Maria felt something even greater than success. She felt fulfillment. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Maria walked inside her old workshop. The tools were still there, though covered in dust. She ran her fingers along the workbench where she had once struggled alone. "I'm back, Papa," she whispered softly. "But this time I'm not alone." Behind her, Mr. Anderson stood quietly watching. "You've done something remarkable," he said gently. Maria turned and smiled. "It's not me, sir. It's the people who believed in me. You, my father, everyone who trusted my hands." He nodded slowly. "That's what makes true greatness, Maria, remembering where you came from even when you rise higher." That night, as the town celebrated with lights, music, and laughter, Maria stood outside, looking at the stars. The same stars she had looked at from her small window so many nights ago. But this time she felt different. The world no longer seemed far away. She had reached it, with honesty, kindness, and hard work. As the helicopter lights blinked in the distance, she smiled and said quietly, "Sometimes life doesn't change because we wish for it. It changes when we keep doing good, even when no one's watching." The wind carried her words softly across the town, through the open fields, and into the hearts of everyone listening. And though the night grew quiet, Maria's story had only just begun. A story that would inspire countless others to believe that even a simple act of goodness can lift you higher than the sky itself. The next few months became some of the busiest days of Maria's life. Her little hometown, once quiet and forgotten, now buzzed with energy and excitement. The new training center stood proudly beside her old workshop, a bright blue building with wide windows and the sign, Aurora Institute, Learn, Build, Believe. Every morning, girls from nearby villages arrived on bicycles, their faces glowing with curiosity and hope. Some had never even touched an engine before, while others came simply to see if they were capable of something greater. Maria welcomed each one of them like a teacher and a friend. "Don't be afraid of mistakes," she would say gently, her hands stained with grease as always. "Machines only speak to those who listen patiently." The first few days were filled with laughter, clumsy hands, and the sound of dropped tools. But Maria didn't mind. She saw her younger self in each of them, nervous yet eager, scared yet determined. Slowly, she began teaching them not just about engines, but about life. One morning, she gathered all the trainees under a tree beside the workshop. The cool breeze carried the scent of oil and flowers. "I want you to remember something," she said softly. "An engine is built from hundreds of parts, and each one matters, just like us. Never think you're too small to make a difference." The girls nodded, eyes shining with admiration. They called her Madame Maria, though she always told them to just call her Didi. Meanwhile, back in the city, Mr. Anderson watched her progress closely. Reports of the new center's success reached him every week. He often smiled while reading them, amazed at how one humble woman had transformed an entire community. "She's not just teaching them skills," he told his assistant one day. "She's teaching them self-worth." But not everything was easy. Running the institute came with challenges. The tools were old, funds were limited, and some people in the neighboring towns doubted her work. "What's the use of teaching women to fix machines?" they mocked. "They belong in kitchens, not workshops." When Maria heard such words, she didn't get angry. She simply smiled and replied, "Engines don't care who fixes them, man or woman. They only care that someone does it right." Still, the doubts hurt her sometimes. At night, when everyone went home, she sat alone in the workshop, staring at the unfinished engines. Her mind filled with worries. Am I doing enough? Can I really change their lives? One evening, as she sat lost in thought, she heard a soft knock at the door. It was a young girl named Ronnie, one of her students. Ronnie came from a poor family and had joined the program with trembling hands and no confidence. "Dee, Ronnie said shyly, holding a small engine part in her hands. "I fixed it. The motor finally runs." Maria looked up, eyes wide. "You did?" Ronnie nodded, smiling through tears. "You were right. I just had to listen." Maria's heart swelled with pride. She stood up, hugged the girl, and whispered, "I told you every engine has a heart. And so do you." That moment erased every doubt in her mind. She realized she wasn't just repairing machines, she was repairing people's belief in themselves. The next morning, she called the girls together and announced something that made their jaws drop. "We're going to build something big," she said excitedly. "Something that will show everyone what we're capable of." "What is it, Dee?" they asked eagerly. "A small electric car," she replied, "built entirely by us." The group gasped. None of them had ever imagined creating a vehicle. But Maria's eyes shone with determination. "We'll start from scratch, with what we have. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to move." The following weeks were filled with the sound of hard work, hammering, welding, testing, and retrying. The girls spent hours learning, making mistakes, laughing, and trying again. Maria guided them patiently every step of the way. Sometimes when they failed, she reminded them gently, "Every failure is just a machine teaching us a new language." Finally, after months of effort, on a golden morning, the little car stood gleaming in the sunlight, small, simple, and beautiful. Painted bright yellow, it looked like a ray of hope on 4 wheels. Maria gathered everyone around. "Let's see if she wants to wake up," she said playfully, turning the key. The engine hummed softly, alive. The girls screamed in joy, jumping and clapping. Some even cried. Mr. Anderson arrived that afternoon, completely surprised. As he saw the car, his eyes widened with pride. "Maria, you did it," he said softly. "No, they did it." Maria smiled, her heart full. "Yes, sir. They just needed someone to believe they could." He looked at her for a long moment before saying, "You've done more for this company, for this country, than you'll ever know. You've proven that true leadership comes from the heart." That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the little electric car rolled down the town road, surrounded by cheering villagers. It wasn't just a machine, it was a symbol of hope, strength, and equality. Maria stood beside it, her hands folded, eyes glistening. She looked up at the sky, whispering, "Papa, I finally built something worth remembering." The helicopter that had once come for her now hovered above again, not to take her away this time, but to witness what she had built below. Maria smiled, her hair dancing in the wind, her dream complete. Yet her heart knew this was only the beginning. The news spread like wildfire. Within a few days, every newspaper and TV channel in the country was talking about the small town woman who had built an electric car with her group of young village girls. Headlines read, "From Dust to Destiny, the woman who changed the game." Maria's miracle, a car built by dreams, not money. Maria's quiet town, once unknown to the world, became a symbol of hope. Reporters came from everywhere to see the yellow electric car that was parked proudly outside her workshop. Children ran around it with excitement while villagers watched in disbelief. Maria, however, stayed humble. She still wore her same simple clothes, still tied her hair back the same way, and still greeted everyone with the same warm smile. I didn't do this alone, she told the journalists. These girls are the real heroes. They built this car with patience, heart, and belief. When Mr. Anderson saw the news, his eyes filled with pride. She's done it again, he whispered. She turned an act of kindness into a revolution. Within a week, Maria and her students were invited to the capital city to present their project at a national innovation fair. The invitation letter had a golden seal. The Prime Minister himself would be attending. The night before the trip, Maria couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch of her small home looking at the stars. The air smelled of jasmine and rain. How far life has brought me, she thought. From fixing old engines in a leaking shed to presenting in front of the nation's leaders. But despite her achievements, her heart was calm. She didn't feel proud. She felt thankful. All I ever wanted was to fix things, she whispered. And somehow, life let me fix more than engines. The next morning, the girls wore neat uniforms with the Aurora Institute logo. Their faces glowed with excitement and nerves. "Dee, will there be real ministers there?" one of them asked. Maria laughed. "Yes, but don't worry. They're just people like us. The only difference is we build with our hands, and they build with words." When they arrived at the grand exhibition hall, they were greeted by cameras, banners, and applause. The yellow electric car stood under bright lights, shining like a star. Maria could hardly believe it was the same creation born in her small, dusty workshop. As the crowd gathered, the Prime Minister himself walked up to her booth, smiling warmly. "So, you're the famous Maria I've heard about," he said. Maria bowed slightly. "I'm just a mechanic, sir," she said humbly. "The girls behind me are the famous ones." He chuckled. "You remind me that true innovation begins with humility." He asked her to explain how they built the car. Maria spoke in her simple way. No fancy words, just honesty. She described how they reused old materials, designed efficient engines, and learned through mistakes. Every word came from her heart, and everyone listened silently, touched by her sincerity. When she finished, the Prime Minister clapped. "You've not only built a car, Maria," he said. "You've built a future. You've proved that with determination, even a small spark can light an entire nation." The applause that followed filled the hall. Tears rolled down Maria's cheeks as she looked at her students. They were crying too, smiling through their tears. That night, Maria was honored with a national award for innovation and women's empowerment. Cameras flashed as she walked up the stage, holding her father's old wrench in her hand instead of a speech. When she stood before the microphone, she took a deep breath and said softly, "This tool belonged to my father. He taught me that. Every machine, no matter how broken, can work again, if you believe in it." I think the same is true for people. The entire audience rose to their feet in applause. Even Mr. Anderson, who watched proudly from the front row, wiped his eyes. He leaned toward his assistant and whispered, "She's not just an engineer anymore. She's a leader, a light." After the ceremony, as the hall emptied and the lights dimmed, Maria walked alone toward the yellow car. She ran her fingers across its smooth surface and smiled. "You did good, little one," she whispered to it, as if it could hear. Outside, the city glittered, but Maria's heart longed for the peace of her town. Fame didn't matter to her. What mattered were the lives she could still change. She decided that her next goal was to open more training centers across the country, places where women could dream and learn without fear. A few weeks later, she returned home to a hero's welcome. The villagers decorated the streets with garlands and lights. Children danced around her, chanting, "Maria Didi, Maria Didi." She smiled, overwhelmed. "It's not my victory," she told them gently. "It's ours. Because every person who believed in me became part of this journey." That night, she stood outside her workshop once again, looking up at the same stars that had watched her all these years. She whispered softly, "Papa, I hope I made you proud." A gentle wind passed through the trees, almost like an answer, quiet, loving, and eternal. The helicopter that once came to her as a miracle now flew past in the distance, its faint sound blending with the wind. But Maria didn't look up this time. She didn't need to. She already knew her life had taken flight. Years passed, but the name Maria became a symbol that echoed far beyond her small town. Her story was told in schools, written in magazines, and shown in documentaries across the world. People called her the woman who listened to machines, but those who knew her personally still called her Maria Didi, the same humble woman with oil-stained hands and a heart that never stopped giving. The yellow electric car she had built with her students was now displayed in a museum in the city, not for its design or technology, but for what it represented: hope, honesty, and courage. A small plaque beneath it read, "Built by hands that believed in change." Yet despite all the fame, Maria never changed. She still woke up early, still wore her simple clothes, and still carried her father's old wrench in her pocket wherever she went. When people asked her why, she smiled and said, "It reminds me where I began, what and who I am." The Aurora Institute had now expanded to several towns across the country. Hundreds of young women worked there, some as engineers, others as trainers. Many of them came from places where no one had ever believed they could do more than household chores. Now they were building engines, fixing vehicles, designing prototypes, and most importantly, believing in themselves. Maria traveled often, visiting each center, guiding the students with her calm voice and gentle humor. She never lectured from behind a desk. Instead, she sat among them, her sleeves rolled up, showing them how to feel the machine's heartbeat. One afternoon, while visiting the first Aurora branch in her hometown, Maria decided to walk alone through the old paths she used to take as a young woman. The air smelled of warm earth and jasmine, and children's laughter echoed in the distance. She smiled. The town had grown, yet it still felt like home. Her old workshop still stood there. Its walls a little older, its roof patched many times, but its soul the same. The signboard still read, "Maria's Repairs, honest work, honest price." She stepped inside. Dust floated in the sunlight streaming through the small window. The workbench where she once struggled, cried, and dreamed was still there. On one corner lay a rusted bolt, and beside it, the marks her father had carved years ago. She ran her fingers over them and whispered, "Papa, we made it." Just then, a gentle knock echoed on the door. A young girl stood there, no more than 12, holding a broken bicycle. "Excuse me, are you the famous Maria Didi?" she asked nervously. Maria smiled kindly. "Famous? I don't know about that, but yes, I'm Maria. What's wrong with your bicycle?" "It won't move," the girl said sadly. "The chain keeps slipping. I tried to fix it, but it's too hard." Maria laughed softly. "Nothing is too hard if you have patience. Come, let's fix it together." They knelt beside the bicycle, and Maria guided her gently. "See this chain? It's not broken, just needs a little adjustment. Sometimes things don't need to be replaced, they just need care." The girl listened carefully, her small hands trembling with excitement. Within minutes, the bicycle was as good as new. The girl's face lit up. "You did it." Maria shook her head with a warm smile. "We did it. Remember that." As the girl pedaled away, waving happily, Maria stood there watching, her eyes soft with emotion. In that moment, she realized this was her true reward. Not awards, not cameras, not praise. It was moments like this where a spark of confidence lit up in someone's heart because of her. Later that evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, a helicopter appeared again in the distance, the same kind that had once landed near her doorstep years ago. But this time it wasn't coming for her. It was part of a government project delivering materials for her new training center. Maria looked up at it and smiled, her heart calm. "It's funny," she whispered. "Once a helicopter brought me my destiny. Now it brings opportunities for others." She sat outside her workshop, sipping tea as the last rays of sunlight faded. Children played nearby, laughter filling the air. She thought of her journey, the little girl who used to hand her father tools, the woman who repaired a millionaire's car, the teacher who changed lives. Her heart whispered softly, "Everything I fixed me too." A cool breeze brushed her face as the stars began to appear. The world was quiet, peaceful, and exactly as she liked it. Maria leaned back, eyes filled with gratitude, and said, "If my story teaches anyone anything, I hope it's this. You don't need to be rich or powerful to change the world. You just need to be kind, honest, and unafraid to start small." Somewhere in the distance, the sound of an engine purred softly, steady and strong, just like her heart. Maria smiled one last time at the open sky and whispered, "Papa, the engines are still running. And under that fading sunset, with the warmth of her memories surrounding her, Maria's story lived on, not in books or awards, but in every heart that dared to dream, to build, and to believe.